First of all, salam alaikum and good afternoon to all our viewers. Let me take this as an opportunity to send some warm wishes from the Siemens family to everybody watching. We hope that you're safe and in good health along with your families during these interesting and testing times for humanity. My name is Karim Mousa, and today I'd like to speak to you about the 5 key enablers that are going to propel the electric vehicle ecosystem as part of future cities. But first, let's take a step back. There's a famous saying that goes, fish don't know that they're in water. With the point being that when you're so immersed in your day-to-day surroundings, when you're so immersed in your day-to-day routine, it's very easy for us to miss some of the gradual changes that are happening around us. When you look out your window or on your last trip to work, you won't exactly notice the way in which humans are moving is undergoing a change that is going to last forever. And this is a much needed change. Today, the global population is around 8 billion. This is projected to grow to 10 billion. Addressing the demands of this growing and ever more demanding population while mitigating the impact on the earth is at the heart of what we do here at Siemens. And let's take a closer look at these numbers. So of these 10 billion, 70% are going to be living in cities. Compare that to 200 years ago, where only 3% of the world's population lived in cities. In 1950, there were 77 cities with a population of 1 million and over. Today, there's 548 cities with a population of 1 million and over, and this number continues to rise. So in rapidly growing cities, existing infrastructure is reaching its limits. We're putting greater pressure on our environment. We're putting greater pressure on our future. And the existing infrastructure is limiting our ability to move, to be more flexible, and to be more efficient. So the world needs new answers. And luckily, humans are constantly finding smarter and more innovative ways to move. So make no mistake, we are in the middle of a major transport revolution. Not since the horse and buggy has mobility been in the midst of such a radical change. And transport revolutions don't just change the way you get to places. They don't just change your day-to-day routines. They change the way our roads and buildings are built. They change the way our economies function. But most importantly, they also change the way that our cities are shaped and built. And I think for me, the way we look at e-mobility, it's always a matter of perspective. And if we were to class it into 2 key perspectives, there would be the perspective of the average commuter, the average person, and he would be looking at it from the driver's seat perspective, right? You'd be sitting in a bus, in a tram, in a metro, in your car, and your main concern is, how do I get to my location as fast as possible in a safe manner? You know, how do I avoid the next traffic jam? How do I get to my next petrol station? But at Siemens, or when we're involved more in the smart city and EV infrastructure side, our perspective is a little wider. We look at it from a city perspective, and we need to answer the following questions. How can we make our journeys more environmental friendly, more affordable, safer, and more connected? And you realize with a closer look at our cities today that most of our work is in fact done for us, because the key enablers for electric vehicle infrastructure lies in today's cities. And I think this perspective is quite important, because in many of the times that we speak about electric mobility, the focus tends to be a lot on 2 topics. One is the vehicles themselves. So we speak a lot about cars and scooters. And the other topic is the batteries. I think infrastructure is, or the electric vehicle infrastructure is a 3rd topic of interest that needs to be, let's say, inserted more into our day-to-day debates about electric mobility. So, I mean, let's do this as a fun approach into what are the 5 key enablers for electric vehicle infrastructure into cities of our future. So let's start with the first key enabler. And that is that electric vehicle infrastructure provides an excellent business case for users who wish to adopt it. Most electric vehicle infrastructure on the market is modular, meaning that you can take advantage of the economies of scale. If to install them. It also means that they could be manufactured fast and they could meet the supply and demand curve whenever necessary. They're easy to install and maintain, so chargers are relatively extremely easy to install. I mean, we had the C-Charge AC22. It's installed in Sustainable City right now, and if you were paying attention earlier, you'd notice that Ben and Karim were actually standing next to the C-Charge AC22, and it took around 10 to 15 minutes to install that unit. So they're very easy to install, and this is quite important if you plan to roll them out on a wide scale. And of course, the fact that they're easy to maintain helps. But perhaps the key aspect of the business case here is that they're also commercially attractive. And some public chargers can provide a business case of a break-even that comes less than 9 months. And this is, in fact, based on the C-Charge AC22, which is installed currently in Sustainable City. If you charge drivers $11 per kilowatt hour and you're charged using both dispensers for 4 hours a day, then the unit is going to break even in less than 9 months. So this is an excellent business case, and it shows that electric vehicle chargers, contrary to what is thought, they make good business sense. So this is the first enabler. Now let's jump to the second enabler, and that is smart EV infrastructure is born ready for the digital world. EV chargers today, especially at Siemens, they're designed to speak to the cloud, and they communicate with backend software through standard protocols. Now, this inherent connectivity allows for several things. The first is a smart user journey. So what that means for a driver is I'm able to access an application, access a map, and be able to spot all the vehicle chargers on the way. I could see which ones are available. I could see which ones are occupied. I could see which ones are out of service or being upgraded. But it also allows me to enter some element of slot management, which means I could reserve a charging slot for myself. So if I know what time I'm going to work or coming back, and I need the charging slot, I can have that booked in advance, which means better queue management. And I think queue management is a modern topic of debate for conventional petrol stations. So a smarter user journey is the first gift of a digitally enabled electric vehicle infrastructure. But the second part is smarter consumer models. So when there's a direct correlation between what is being produced and what is being consumed, in this case, electricity, you can have very smart tariff models and incentive models for your customers. What that means is if there's an area of the city where there is excess PV generation, maybe you can incentivize the locals in that area by reducing tariffs for electric vehicle charging in that given area. What this does is it incentivizes people of a certain town, of a certain locale, to promote and adopt more PV, for example, so that they support their ecosystem as a whole. You could also incentivize consumer behavior. So as a charge point operator, I could put a subsidy or a discount for drivers that book their charging slots in advance. And what that allows us to do is it allows for overall better queue management for the charge point operator and the driver, and the consumer ends up being happy because he obviously gets cheaper charging. Another important aspect of being digitally enabled is smarter load management. So when you speak to owners of real estate premises or communities or buildings or hotels, one of their challenges in installing electric vehicle infrastructure on their premises is the existing electrical capacity on site. So a lot of them would have a limited kilowatts, and not many would be eager to install additional substations or contact the local utility for additional power. So what you can do is using your existing power and having your electric vehicle chargers speaking to one another and speaking to a central backend system, this load can become smartly distributed between the separate charging dispensers and the separate cars. You can even distribute it according to consumer behavior. So if you have somebody who is staying in a location for 15 minutes compared to someone who is a resident in that location, you could provide the person who is staying for a lesser duration faster charging, maybe at a higher tariff, maybe not. But you could start to see that you could pick up different consumer behaviors and factor those in digitally, whereas this was not the case or is not the case today in most charging stations. So that's the second key enabler. Let's jump to the third enabler of electric vehicle infrastructure. I'm waiting for the slides to move. There you go. So the third key enabler is, let me put it this way. If the power distribution network was a human, he or she would be the biggest ambassador for promoting electric mobility infrastructure. Think about it. Electric mobility infrastructure lives on the grid edge, which means almost anywhere with the availability of reliable electricity, EV infrastructure can be deployed. Now, what that means is, in most cities around the world, this means that you can have an electric vehicle charger right outside your home, outside your building, in parking garages, outside shops, and you can even have them indoors. And I mean, this is a very important point for the debate of electric mobility. Because think about it, if you were to speak to most average commuters on the road today, and you were to ask them, what is your number one concern or reservation about electric mobility? And their response would be is that they're not sure about the availability of chargers en route to their location. This is a very common concern. Now, for those of us working in electric vehicle infrastructure, we cannot imagine this being any sort of long-term problem because, as we said, electric vehicle infrastructure can virtually be placed anywhere. And let's hold the comparison to conventional petrol stations and conventional transport methods. Electricity can travel faster, cheaper, more environmental friendly, and safer than fuel. And can you imagine at the end of the day having a fuel pump placed at similar locations that you would be able to place electric vehicle chargers? Can you imagine having a fuel pump placed right outside a building or a fuel pump placed indoors? The answer is no. So this is a very major enabler for electric vehicle infrastructure. And I think this readiness and ease to deploy makes electric vehicles or electric vehicle infrastructure or gives it an edge in future installations. And I mean, how is it doing in today's market? So projected growth for most grid edge technologies by 2024, e-mobility infrastructure is expected to grow at over 30%, so taking up the majority of the share there. And other aspects which are important for a reliable and stable e-mobility grid are also growing. That includes energy storage and distributed energy systems. So excellent enabler here for electric vehicle infrastructure. So what's the fourth key enabler? We've already stated three. What's the fourth key enabler for EV infrastructure? Now, electric mobility can utilize distributed energy systems and microgrids like no other mode of transport can. Decentralized solar energy, wind energy, and battery energy storage are becoming an integral part of our energy ecosystem. And this means that when you this means that when we integrate electric vehicle infrastructure into this equation, we're hitting multiple birds with one stone. And think about the consumer or the control this gives the consumer over the full supply chain. If I, as a driver, am able to install photovoltaic panels on my roof, generate electricity, and bring this electricity into your vehicle, then you have control over the supply of you've never had before. The equivalent in conventional terms is having an oil field and a refinery in your backyard, which is virtually impossible. And maybe a good business case for this enabler is a modern bus depot. So at Siemens, we pay very close attention to bus depots because we believe that they are a good example of an integrated and comprehensive electrical ecosystem. So if you have a bus depot, you could bring together different elements of power distribution, charging infrastructure, and distributed energy systems all in one place. The power distribution systems would make sure that the grid connectivity to the bus depot is in place. You have to keep in mind that bus depots are locations where you would have no charging requirement for a given period of time when the buses are out on the street. And then suddenly at night, when the fleet is back to be charged, you have a massive peak in electricity demand. So your distribution network needs to be well positioned and strong and ready to handle this. Of course, you then have the different elements of charging infrastructure. Could include charging depots, it could include pantographs for opportunity charging, and of course, it could include fleet charging, which is distributed along the bus depot. At the same time, you could integrate distributed energy systems. Bus depots take up a big amount of space in any city, so they're a good location for a number of rooftop panels, energy storage, and of course, you can begin to integrate other elements of monitoring and control. So bus depots are an excellent test case for electric mobility coming together with distributed energy systems. So now let's move to the fifth and last key enabler, and that is vehicle-to-grid technology. And I think we're going to start hearing about this technology a lot in the coming years. Okay, I need to put my presentation in full screen again. Somebody has put it out of full screen. Roger, if you can hear me, put it up, please. Perfect. Okay, so I think we're going to start hearing about vehicle-to-grid technology a lot in the coming weeks, months, and years. And vehicle-to-grid technology is a perfect example of when the energy and mobility sector can complement one another. Today, the flow of energy is one directional. So the grid is supplying energy to the charger, which is in turn supplying energy to the car, and that energy is being stored in a battery. And this is the typical direction that electricity is flowing in. Now, with vehicle-to-grid technology, this direction can also be reversed, meaning that the energy from the car's battery could flow to the grid. So the case you would have is when you have a surplus of energy being generated by wind and solar on the grid, you can use this energy to charge cars. But when you have a shortage of electricity on the grid from renewables or for other reasons, battery from cars could be used to supply the grid to keep it more stable. And this becomes more amazing when you realize that cars and vehicles or electric vehicles are parked for more than 80% of their lifetime. So they become excellent green energy hubs. I mean, can you think of these big bus depots, which are usually diesel consuming stations that smell of diesel, suddenly becoming green renewable energy hubs that are supporting the grid? And I mean, vehicle to grid, this is a key answer to often raised concerns about electric vehicle infrastructure, that the increase of EVs is making grids intermittent and unstable. Vehicle to grid is going to reverse that. It's rather going to say that electric vehicles are in fact supporting the grid and making it more reliable and more stable. So if I haven't convinced you to buy an electric vehicle yet, don't worry, that was not the purpose. I think the idea today was to be able to share a different perspective, to provide our viewers and our listeners a different perspective to the electric vehicle debate, and that is the topic of electric vehicle infrastructure, so that you could carry this into your next thought processes and debates. I think as a final statement, I just want to thank everyone for listening. The electric vehicle is writing history. It's going to change the way we get to our destinations and the overall environmental impact of our journeys. So thank you very much for listening, and I'm happy to take any questions.
I love the fact that you're now talking about electric vehicles being this sort of moving energy hub, this green renewable energy hub that's just going to sort of travel around cities, giving energy to anyone who wants it. and the fact that you can actually make money back on your car if you're selling it back into the grid at times when it's expensive. But I've got to actually, sorry, I'm rambling on. What I want to do is get to some very quick questions that we've had in for you. So we have one question that has come from Ayman Mohammed, and they would like to know, what is the criteria that you're using to put fast chargers to be able to serve electric taxis to overcome the problem of range anxiety and charging time. That's really interesting because actually in London at the moment, we're rolling out quite a lot of electric taxis. And I know a few of the cabbie drivers are having issues with the charging. So it'd be great. What's the criteria that you're using at the moment, Karim?
Look, for fast charging, I think or let's start it this way. In any business case, you need to first look at consumer behavior. And if you're looking at a taxi, taxis tend to be constantly on the run. They take little to no breaks during the day, except when they stop working. And they need to keep moving to make a living. And the ideal locations for taxi drivers at the moment they're mostly stopping at petrol stations. So as simple as it sounds, fast DC charging, which could be served through the Siemens fast DC charging portfolio, these DC chargers need to be located at petrol stations, conveniently for taxi drivers. Yeah. This way, taxi driver can stop, take a little break, charge his car for 10 to 15 minutes, and then get moving again, and then stop at the next rest or petrol station for more top up. This is the immediate, let's say, a business case that's available with the available technologies currently.